over this mess.
Hey
I'm sorry
everybody,
to hear that.
this is Jim West and Dale Ross on the Dale and Jim show, and today we got Coach Austin Trotter to join us. Coach, how you doing today?
As good as I can be right now.
Still hacking it up.
Yeah, I'm still I'm still dealing with COVID, so I'm trying to. Most of my symptoms have subsided. I'm starting to get a little smell and taste back. There's still a little bit of a cough, so
I hope
So
you
you're
feel
not
better.
able to coach this Friday night, is that right?
I'm not able to coach Friday night, and this is also the week that we're playing 3 games in 7 days, so I'm not able to coach Tuesday night either.
Gotcha. That's tough, but the bigger thing is you get better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those breakthrough vaccinated cases.
Uh-huh.
I'm vaccinated. I've got symptoms, and it started luckily far enough out that it didn't impact the team. And symptoms have been pretty minor. Like I said, loss of taste and smell has been awful for a couple of days. They're not being able to taste anything's killing me. But
I got you. Yeah, I think at least a good thing, the vaccination helps in that you would have been worse. So I guess that's one way to look at it, right?
not exactly.
So, Jim, what we're going to do is we're going to talk. I haven't given the segment a name, but hopefully, Coach is going to be a guest more often. And last time that we talked, one of the things that I thought would be very beneficial would be to start explaining football. There's a lot of people that don't understand football and the different formations that one may see, the different types of plays, maybe why you run some plays and you don't run others. Not all that's going to get covered tonight, but those are kind of some of the things that I would like to get into. I would like to possibly be able to get into discussing positional play and what each position may require out of a player based on the type of offense or defense you're running. Why do you sometimes have one tight end or no tight ends or 2 tight ends or all of that kind of stuff? So hopefully, Coach, you're going to be willing to discuss that kind of stuff with us.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to be able to do that. I love talking ball, so any chance I get to do it, I'm going to take advantage of it.
Awesome. When I wanted to do this several years ago in a in-person for Moms Football 101.
Mm-hmm.
So that because you got a lot of moms that, I mean, let's be truthful. Moms will probably go to anything you do as a kid. Most kids, I should say. Unfortunately, some kids don't have that opportunity to have a close family relationship. But anyway, and a lot of moms really don't know the game, and maybe they would like to know the game. So that was my first thought. But I'd like to, over time, go over this and get deeper. One of the things I'll just have you keep in the back of your mind that I'm going to want to discuss. But it was a great discussion back years ago on the forums on Carolina Varsity, and that was, how do you defend the wing T? I got my ideas on how you defend a wing T offense, but teams still run them, and I think it's actually a great offense.
We play a traditional wing T team this year that's also shown some single wing, and then we're also going to play a pistol wing T team this year. So we get 2 opportunities to go against it. And I was actually laughing with the coach because we're going to go from playing a spread team to playing a pro I team to playing a spread team to playing a wing T team to a spread team to a wing T team. So it's just back and forth every week for us, having to adjust to the different types of offenses we're going to see.
Gotcha. And, there are different approaches people take, so I'd like to kind of discuss those maybe here in a segment because some people may not understand why. So when my belief, when you run these wing offenses, especially a wing T, you have a nose guard. You have a zero technique, and you bust that center's butt, because if you can bust that center, you can bust up a lot of plays. Now the pistol wing tee is a little bit different, but those are kind of the other things that we can go over, is to how those offenses operate, and how you may defend them, and why you may be in one scheme of defense one week and a different scheme the next week. And the parents may not understand it. Oh, we played real good, and we were able to play cover zero, and now he's got everybody back. That kind of stuff. Why you do those things? Why you run certain plays at certain points in the game? So tonight, and first, before we get into it, Coach, I'd like to discuss, guys. I was asleep till 6:30, and then I had problems getting my software going. So I've just got a very basic Wolfpack background. It's not the background I wanted, and it's not even scaled properly. But there was an event that happened this weekend at the game, besides State winning a big game, and that was what happened afterwards. And I saw a post on Twitter from who turned out to be, I guess, one of the backup quarterbacks of Clemson's father, and he coaches ball in South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And he made a comment about, now I don't know if the Clemson player Williams spit on anybody or not, because there's no evidence of that. And I don't know if you guys are aware of that situation.
Not aware.
So it kind of blew up a little bit, and what I saw from the video was that he was like a lingering player. Instead of, in a situation like that, you got to understand that there's going to be an active response to a big win like that. So players should evacuate the field as quickly as possible, at least from the losing team. And with the COVID protocols and all, I wouldn't expect you'd want players lingering around anyway. So you had one player who was kind of just all by himself, from what I could see. And a couple of fans, surely there were fans saying things. This father said that fans were spitting on players. I don't know that happened or not. We don't know. But a lot of people, and it shared around Twitter, shared around the various social media, that this Clemson player spat on a young lady. Now, I looked at the first video, and I was like, wow, what was that? But then I got to thinking, that's too white to be spit. That's probably his chin strap. And as I looked further and found the original videos that people were copying, you could see his chin strap, flying around as he jerked his head. So I don't think he spit on anybody. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was, I did respond to that player's dad, coach. I don't think he ever responded back. I didn't see it. But he was kind of laying it out that it was on the fans that this happened. And this is still early on, when everybody's thinking this player's did some spitting, instead of putting some accountability on the player. And I thought, here's a high school coach, and he's not putting that accountability on the player, which you should always, I think, put the accountability on your players. That's why I'm glad I got a coach here to see if his thoughts are like mine, in that we develop character of players to attempt to leave the scene and to not get into any alterations with others. Very emotional game. That was in a very emotional game, and football's an emotional game, and that's part of what makes you a good player, is you have emotions that drive you. What do you think, Coach? Is that one of high school coach? So my question is, how much responsibility does a head coach hold in trying to build character?
I mean, it's definitely the biggest part of what we do, is trying to build players, and not necessarily on the football field, but like you mentioned a minute ago, I mean, a lot of guys come from broken homes. A lot of guys come from situations where it's not the best environment, and we try to instill different values and norms and things into their lives that will help them grow and help them move on. I mean, I'm a prime example of somebody that football helped greatly. Just, as in a important time in my life, having football and coaches who I knew cared about me and invested in me is the reason I coach now. And so that's very important. It's an unfortunate situation. And I know what Coach Helms is talking about. I can see where he's coming from on that. Yes, we want our players to not respond to that stuff because we teach them in a game. If somebody crosses the line, you don't retaliate. You don't, give into it. You get away from the scene. And it is an emotional event. You just lost a close game in double overtime. And really for them, their season not is over, but for them to make the playoffs, that's pretty much gone. So there's a lot of emotion there on the player's part. And this is why I don't like the idea of people storming the field after a game. I know it's emotional for the fans involved, but it's a definite safety risk. We've seen way too many times where things can happen when all that, a large group of people storm a field. It's asking for a bad situation to happen. And that's why, regardless if, who the team is involved or what's going on, I'm always waiting for something to happen during a game when you see, 15,000 people storm a field after a game and the coaches are having to get escorted out by troopers to try to get through the crowd and the players are kind of left to fend for themselves in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, it opens itself up for a situation to happen, and it's easy to say, hey, so-and-so did this in a crowd of that many people. And it's hard a lot of times to get, video evidence of what it was, or if you do, it's not from a good angle. Yes, you want your players to respond appropriately to that. You want your players to try to get themselves out of that situation. But at the same time, when you're surrounded by 5,000 people and everywhere you turn around, spitting on someone, if it happened or not, that's not the appropriate response. But again, you're putting players in a no-win situation when you allow people to storm the field, because let's be honest, there's a lot of alcohol involved and they're probably in their face saying things and they feel no fear. And you're trying to ask a lot of 18, 19, 20-year-olds to control their emotions after a highly emotional game when they're being, verbally assaulted and potentially physically assaulted by, a lot of people.
Yeah, so that's though I'm going to ask about high school, but I saw happen, if everybody remembers the situation of NC State, East Carolina. And East Carolina played NC State close the previous season. And I mean, it was extremely close. And the drinking, et cetera, it's just amazing how liquor bottles were making it into the stadium. The next season, they won. And they, the ECU fans stormed the field and tore the goalposts down, and they did all that stuff. And there was a penalty put on them of NC State refused to play them after that point. That was a huge rival because those are two very common culture groups of people. They kind of come from the same kinds of families, et cetera. So that really was a pretty big battle. How do you keep college fans? So we had a discussion last night on Talking Preps about high schools and storming. And how do you keep fans from storming fields in college? We didn't discuss that, but one of my thoughts is you hold everybody accountable that storms a field. So they got to get back off the field, right? So you shut down the stadium. And then as people come out, you take their name and information. It may take a while, but then you got to hold them accountable. You can fine a university for doing that. So the ACC could fine NC State for letting something like that happen. But does that keep fans from doing it the next time? No, because they know, well, the school will pay for it if we do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to keep that kind of event from happening, you got to hold accountability on the fans. Everybody's got to be accountable for their actions. I think players have got to try to hold themselves to higher standards, but let's face it, they're warriors. They just fought a battle. Um, some of them lost, and their emotions are still high because not only did they lose, they lost in overtime. So that just kind of gears the emotions up even more, I think, I believe. So what fans don't understand is those players have a weapon on them too. They got a helmet that they could take off and slap a fan upside the head with, and that could lead to death. So fans, there's danger for both players and fans there. That kind of event should never happen.
Take a big player and just have them roll over your average fan. See how much pain that fan gets when he gets knocked down on the ground.
Any player,
The
I
thing,
mean, yeah, even, not even using a helmet, but just
just
a
running them
large,
over.
yeah, just hit. I mean, yeah, it's
The thing
how'd
that gets me,
you like to have a starting free safety hit you?
yeah, I mean, it's especially when they have some like if they get about a 5 yard warm up, and run right
Right.
directly into you. It's the physics of it's just not good. But the thing about it though, a lot of times is we always have our rose tinted glasses on or blinders on. We see this thing that happened about the Clemson player with NC State fans. What we don't ever recognize is all the times when this happens and the players do the right thing and they walk away. They show good teamwork, good sportsmanship. They basically turn the other cheek. We don't, as a society, ever give those kids credit. And the thing is we
Mhm.
expect that to happen. But I'm gonna tell you right now, if you have 5,000 people in your face telling you how much you suck and how much your team's lousy and how you choked
Well,
and
how
all
we
that
beat
stuff,
you? Yeah.
yeah,
So
it's
Jim,
your
I
emotions are
don't
going to
know.
come out.
I'm sorry. I don't know. I haven't seen anything because really I've been this ear thing has really knocked me down. And I have not seen if there's any proof the player did anything. In my mind, all the player did was turned and maybe said something. He turned his head quickly. Maybe some of his physical actions a little bit were a little aggressive at that point, but that's a real short clip as well. And I don't hold him at fault personally right now. I don't think he spit.
Right.
Um, I don't, unless unless that girl comes out and says, yeah, he spit on me. But did he spit on you or did he just say something loud and some spittle came out,
The
and that's
Uh,
the other thing too, because if you're yelling and something happens to fly out of your mouth, that's different than you
Yeah.
purposely spitting on someone. But through
exactly.
video, you're going to see something fly out of somebody's mouth, and you're not going to know what the intent behind that action was.
I mean, it's
So,
not like
Jim, to your
just
point, Jim,
yeah.
we don't hear about the players that do the right thing.
Right.
One of the things that has to be instilled into a player, I think, is that the player is representing many aspects of his life. He's representing himself. He's representing his family. He's representing his team family. And in this case, he's representing his university. So unfortunately, his actions, not his, this is a generic statement now. Any player's actions, be them a uh, female volleyball player, a football player, your actions do shine a bit on the university. Uh, Maybe they shouldn't. Maybe we as humans should understand everybody's actions are different, but we don't. Um,
I
And
just
some
went
of
and watched the video. I hadn't seen it, and it's kind of what I was afraid I was going to see. There's a player who is surrounded by hundreds of fans from the other team, and they're putting their hands on him.
yeah,
Some of them are shoving him, not like two hands shoving him, but they're putting hands on him. And right before he turned, somebody pushed him right in his shoulder, and he turns, and that's when it happens. Now, did he spit or not? You don't know.
yeah.
But the problem is he's had 10 people in the course of 6 steps put their hands on him, and he's surrounded by all these people. So again, it's a situation that's just asking for something to happen when you allow for fans to storm the field after a game and surround everybody. It's just a recipe for something to go wrong.
and you got to hold everybody accountable. You can't just hold one player accountable. To me, the security or NC State for allowing those fans to go in. If they didn't have enough people in the around the stadium to make sure that it didn't happen, I think state has a little bit of quote unquote blood on their hands. I mean, was anybody keeping the state accountable? I think Dell is, but
Yeah,
I don't. I think you're probably one of the few that's doing that. Outside
but
of
you
maybe
can't.
fans from Clemson.
Right, but you can't. The problem is, and I thought about this hard in college football as an example. You can put security out there all you want. It's still going to happen. It happens. We've seen. I've been at games that you had just tons of security standing around. That ECU game had a lot of security at it. Had more security at it than I had seen at a college game. And I think the only way you can keep something like that happening is if you've ever been to a NASCAR event, you're aware of the fencing that's there as you come out of the
Yeah, that's for your own
pit
safety.
turn. It's for safety to keep parts from flying up there,
Yeah.
but you'd have to have that kind of fencing around the entire stadium to keep fans out. Just
One other
putting
thing, though,
bodies.
you have alcohol that's served over at Carter Finley Stadium now, and like
Mhm.
5 years ago or three, whenever it was, you didn't have it. Uh, I have no problems with drinking alcohol for sure, but I sometimes wonder if that's not a good safeguard by taking that stuff out again. I mean, it's like basically if you can't
Yep.
behave, have alcohol, we're going to search search you for making sure you don't have airplane bottles and stuff like that on you. To me, that's a safeguard. When schools allowed alcohol to go into their stadiums, they're accepting additional risk, and the
I
schools
agree.
have to be held accountable for that.
I'll say this too from the security aspect. Coming from a law enforcement background, it is practically impossible to hold back a large mob of people without the ability to use force.
Right.
And all you're doing is having the fear of arrest is the only thing that's keeping those people from jumping the fence or jumping the wall and running on the field. And in that moment, they're not worried about being arrested. They're just elation and running on the field. So you could have twice as much security, but I don't know what you can say the state or the school from a security aspect could do more than, because you're going to be overrun no matter what. It's not possible unless you're allowing them to use force, which is not going to happen of any and force of any kind. I'm not saying, deadly force, but I'm saying any type of force is not going to happen when you have that number of people. So yes,
The only way security could keep it from happening, you'd have to have an equal or larger estimated number of people that's going to storm
right
to defend, and that's not realistic. So,
Question I had though is, when you have alcohol served in the stadiums, you might have, instead of having 2,000 people or 1,000 people inebriated, you might have 10,000 people inebriated. Because I know when I was in school, we didn't have alcohol and didn't sell alcohol, but you did have alcohol in the stands. I can promise you that.
yeah,
I wonder
yeah.
how much that has to do with it, though. I really do.
Well, it's always, there's always got to be those first, 10 or 20 people to jump. There's always got to be the first ones to go do it.
that's
And
right.
typically, a lot of times, they're going to be the ones who may be inebriated of some kind. If you cut off alcohol, they cut off alcohol sales in the third quarter most of the time. But that's still not enough time for some of those to get out of their system.
No,
If you're going to do this, you got to cut it off at halftime. And even then, it may not be enough time, depending on how long. A 12 o'clock game is a different inebriation than somebody doing a 3:30 or a 7 o'clock kickoff, because now they've had all day to get it in. But again, if you don't allow it in or you don't sell it, yes, now the whole course of the game. Now, granted, like you said, there's going to be people sneaking in airplane bottles and everything else, but it's going to be a lot smaller fraction.
Right.
Or if there's ways to cut it off earlier. I mean, I don't know if y'all saw the picture of the Panther fan that one week, about 2 weeks ago, that had like 32 Bud Light bottles under his seat. There's got to be a way to control it. But again, you're trying to ask the impossible of security to keep people from running on. There has to be some type of larger penalty. I mean, if you're in a football game and a fight breaks out and you step 1 foot off the sideline, you're suspended. So if you jump on the field and they can identify who you are, you should be suspended from games for the rest of the year. I don't know what, but again, you're trying to track down 5,000 people or however many are on the field, but there needs to be something, because all it's going to take is one person to take it a little bit too far. And now we've got ESPN running replays 24 hours of a player on the field fighting fans.
Right.
And that's where it's inevitably going to go to, is we're going to have an on-field version of the Malice at the Palace.
Yeah, I think you got to have a penalty. You got to have or penalties. They have to be strong penalties too, that the people getting ready to do it are thinking about. So for them to be suspended, most definitely. I think if you're told this is not going to be allowed, and you come over and down onto the field after the game, you should be suspended from being able to purchase a ticket to a game, to enter a game. Now that probably takes us into the next thing of doing more identification when we enter stadiums. Because right now, to enter a college game, you just got to have a ticket, and you got a ticket you can get in. So we would have to start being able to recognize who the people are that have been suspended. So that's one penalty, and I like that penalty. But I think you've also got to have one that you can actually make stick legally, and that would be some kind of you can't make it a major penalty, but at least some kind of misdemeanor. They got to pay fines. They got to pay, maybe they got to go to court, and these things don't get thrown out. So it's not something that a judge would allow you to, like get out of. You do end up paying a penalty, and that penalty carries from a legal penalty to a penalty that maybe the NCAA puts on you. So it's not just.
And the schools themselves need to kind of come out and hardline this too, because, most of them say, fans don't run on the field, but in reality, they know that they're not going to stop them and there's not going to be a penalty for them. And it's just empty words of saying, don't do it. The schools themselves have got to come up with something that they can do that with. But you're right. I mean, it may take, because here's what's going to happen. The minute that this thing escalates, now the NCAA is going to reactionary come back and say, okay, well, from here on out, if this happens, then the schools will be fined X amount of money. You'll lose this, you'll lose that. But the incident's already happened. There needs to be some type of proactive looking ahead to what could potentially happen here if, this continues to be allowed to happen.
So how do we keep it from being a problem in high school?
I don't. I'll be honest with you. I've never. Well, I take that back. I do take that back. It's happened, but it's not been to the level of, surrounding the opposing team. I've seen, fans run onto the field after a game, and it's typically kind of stayed to their side of the field. I'm sure it's happened, but I think it's a little easier, if with a high school game to kind of, one, you're going to identify who your students are. And if that happens, your camera guy just keeps rolling the camera and you can identify your own students. Because typically that's who it's going to be. And you should know who they are just by being able to look at the camera. We had, that's why I took it back. We had some fans run on the field one time, and I stepped in between them and running any further back, and was like, you got to get back off the field. And they listened, but
I have seen it happen at, several big games. The ones that stick out in my head was a West Rowan Kannapolis game, third round playoff game at West Rowan. Independence Butler game at Memorial Stadium that probably had one of the biggest crowds I've seen at Memorial Stadium, quite honestly. It was a very big crowd. Several of those Indy Butler games back in the 2000s ended up having some situation where fans came down onto the field. I see it less, though, that West Rowan Kannapolis game was, of course, at West Rowan. So it was on a school campus versus Memorial Stadium. But you don't just have football. I think the bigger potential problem is in the gymnasium.
Basketball is the one where, I'm not gonna lie, like there's, I get asked to come to games and for that purpose of just, keeping people on the sides for after the game. And it is, you're in an environment, and basketball is just, it can cause a lot more heated environment because the fans are already right there anyway.
Right.
And there's jawing that goes on, and then both fans they're all, and a lot of times they're going out the same exit. If you're at a place like ours, you got one entrance, one exit. I mean, they all go out the same way. So,
I do have some history stories to tell you about basketball fighting back in the '60s. Probably the worst time when it came to actual sportsmanship was in the late '60s. We all have our ideas about the '60s. I mean, it was basically a melting pot of a lot of ignorance, a lot of unknowns, and a lot of change all mixed together. We had, it was the beginning of the desegregation in a lot of places in the South. And I think it was the high school called Mars Hill High School. It was, I think it was Mars Hill and Marshall and maybe one other school consolidated to become Madison County. It got so bad with fighting at basketball games, they had to have all games, home games at Mars Hill, was without any fans at all. It got so bad. Pinecrest back in 1970 or 71, they had to play several football games with no fans in the stadium. It had nothing to do with COVID or anything like that. It had everything to do with safety. If you look at even when I was growing up in the '80s, sportsmanship was not that great after games. There used to be a lot of fights in the parking lots and stuff like that after games. I've been going the last 15 years. I think I've maybe seen one fight or maybe two fights out in the parking lots. Walking back to my car. These kids today, a lot of people will complain about the kids today. I think these kids today are probably just as good, if not better, than any other generation. Better than my generation. I can promise you that. It's it's. I think a lot of times we tend to say, well, this is the worst generation ever because they do that, this and that. I think a lot of people have a faulty memory. They don't remember all the crap that happened back in the '60s and '70s and '80s.
Well, Jim, I lived it. You were still. What year were you born in?
I was born in '71.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you were in the six, I don't. I was gonna say if you were in the '60s, it would have been '68 or '69. Of course, I was born in 1960, and I know a lot of that tension that existed, not at the high school level, but I, I didn't mean for us to go too long on this. It's a good thought that what we have to do, and I do believe that we have less of a problem in high school than we do in college, but we could still have the problem. And we can't, I've heard some people say security, 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 and you just can't. You might could do it at high school because kids are going to be a little more afraid of a uniformed individual, but fans, college fans, no. That's just I'll just try not to go over him. I'll try to go around him if I can. You'd have to barricade the entire, and maybe go 3 or 4 deep of people standing there to keep that from happening. And I just don't think
also
that
don't have the alcohol issue with a high school game.
Yeah, you're
you
not
don't
gonna
have
have that.
you don't have the alcohol issue.
I'm gonna say right now, alcohol is a big, big factor in a lot of
Sure it is.
issues. If you go down to like Florida State, I think Florida State was the very first team that had alcohol at the old Leon Civic Center or whatever Civic Arena there down in Tallahassee. They had alcohol back in the '90s, and that place was more rowdy than you'll ever see at the Dean Smith Center or Cameron Indoor or over at or even back when Reynolds Coliseum was going on at NC State.
Yeah, so I agree. Because that stuff starts in the pregame tailgating.
Yeah.
The drinking starts then, and if you allow it to just continue in, you don't ever allow those people to start entering a sober state. And I'm sorry, alcohol does lower people's
Reasoning skills, that's for sure.
their reasoning skills, and that security guy can't stop me. Where I get five of my people here, and he can't stop all five of us, so we're going to go on the field. The kids have in high school that would kind of scare them, and that would keep them back. But in college, no. So you got to have penalties. You got to make people pay. You lock the stadium down, and you hold everybody accountable that's on the field that shouldn't have been. So if you're not a university employee, a conference employee, a player, a coach, if you're not someone that's supposed to be on the field, then you face a penalty. And that might cut it back. I don't know. It would cut it back some, but how much? I don't know.
I was going to say suspend some kids for a semester that are students. See how quick that curves things around.
Yeah, because most of those, I'm sure, were students. So you take away that student ID access to go to games. Like, nope, you don't go to you cannot go to a game, and they have to scan that. So I don't know if that is being done, but you would implement something like that. That your ID can't be used. So you gotta hold them accountable. Let's move on. I think you're probably ready to jump into what you wanted to do and what I'd like to do. So we're going to call this segment, I don't know, learning football, understanding football.
How about Trotter time?
Trotter time.
That's fine. So I'm going to let you introduce it, and
okay,
let's go.
All right. So like we said, we wanted to get more into actual football stuff. As far as some specifics, and I don't want to get too detailed that only if you've been coaching 20 years you'll understand it. I want to give a little bit of stuff to kind of help people understand, and the biggest one that I think is kind of a confusion for a lot of people, and this includes people who announce games on Saturdays and Sundays. What is an RPO, and how is an RPO different than a play action pass? And how are they utilized, and a little bit about how it came about. So let's see here. Well, first I'll say this. The RPO is something that when I was calling plays back around 2006, we kind of first started implementing, but it's changed so much. Now you have different variations of it, and you've got different level reads of it. Whereas your play action pass is still the same standard play action that it's always been. But let me see if I can get this to work and share with you. All right. Can you see?
Okay.
This.
So I'm going to turn that on so we can bring it in. And that's exactly how I wanted it to be. Okay.
All right. So my cursor's working. You can see that because I got to be able to identify some stuff here for you.
So you want to identify also, the player packages that you're running, tight ends, running backs.
So in this situation,
personnel, I should say.
Yeah, in this situation, we would call this as an 11 personnel. So one back, one tight end. We would consider this guy a tight end. Some people will consider this 20. They would consider him a running back or a back, so they could call it 20. It's 2 back, 0 tight end. So it depends on how you identify this guy right here that I'm circling for you.
So I call him a halfback in some of the more modern offenses.
Yeah, you'll hear somebody call him an H-back. Yeah, and that's what we term him as is an H-back. But I classify this as 11 personnel because I think of him as a guy who can move and be a tight end as well. Because it's that type.
I call him a gives back. You know what a gives back is, don't you? For Joe Gibbs, he used to love the H-back formation so much.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. So early on with us, when we first started with RPOs, okay, it's not in the sense that we think of RPOs now. It was more like a packaged play. So what we would do is we would call some type of run play here, some type of inside run, but we would have a screen outside tagged to it. and it was automatically built into the play call. So based upon alignment, and right here, I've got this guy shown here, if he's not covering, we would just turn and throw it out there. And we did that to protect our run game, because this box right here, this is what we talk about. If you hear somebody say, how many do they have in the box? That's tackle to tackle, linebacker depth, how many's in there? So we've got 5. As an offense, we have 5 offensive linemen and an H-back. So that's 6 blockers and 2 potential runners if your quarterback is a threat. If not, it's still it's still 6 blocking 5, and you have the running back here. So you have a numbers advantage. So this is where the RPO kind of came into play. All right. Is to help your numbers and to keep the numbers advantage in your favor, no matter what the defense does. Now, I consider the RPO to be the modern triple option football game. And you'll see why here if you're familiar with how option football works. Okay. So let's start here to the left. And this is where we've kind of changed things over time from package plays to RPOs to kind of having both. You can pick whichever side you want to do this. So let's say you have some type of just inside zone run game here. Everybody up front is going to step to the right. He's going to block out, and we're going to run the ball right down the middle of the field. Okay. The quarterback is going to come out to the line of scrimmage, and let's say the left side, for however the offense tagged it. Okay, this is our pre-snap read. The gift is a pre-snap. Typically, teams will have something like a hitch or a slant, something over here that if the defense is giving you this pre-snap based upon their alignment, the quarterback is authorized to go ahead and throw it out there right now. And typically, if they're giving you that, that's a 3 or a 4 yard gain at worst. So in this situation, we kind of tell our guys it's not there. They're playing over top. He's kind of playing inside here. He can quickly get there. We wouldn't throw that gift. We don't consider that being them giving us something. So our RPO side would be over here. Now, RPO stands for run pass option. Okay, so there's still the option in there. You have the run option here. You have the pass option here. All right. The way that we teach an RPO is that there is a conflict defender. All right. You can't serve 2 masters. All right. You hear that on Sundays. So this defender right here, he can't be both a pass defender and a run defender. He's either going to be neither, or you're trying to make him, you're allowing him to make the decision on what you're going to do. Okay. So we teach this. If this is who we're reading, this is the conflict defender. We're trying to put him in conflict between run or pass. Then this receiver is going to replace him. So what I mean by that, when the ball snapped, the quarterback right now is looking at this defender. If he comes down here to try to insert into the run game, and that will change our numbers. So instead of having 6 on 5, now it becomes 6 on 6 or even 6 on 7. He's going to replace this right behind. All right, and I've got some stuff I'll show you here in just a second. If he were to drop, then now the quarterback just gives the ball. Well, let me go back. This is just like old school veer triple option football. If the defensive end comes upfield, we give it. If he squeezes into the box, we pull it. And now we're running option out the side. Now, if he squeezes into the box, he pulls it, he throws it to replace him. If he stays out there, we give it, we have the numbers. Now, you can run this to either side. It doesn't always have to be to a 2 or a 3, 3-man side or a 1-man side. You can pick whichever one you want. This side could be the gift. So you could have most teams will run a screen to a 2-man side on a gift route. This outside receiver would block here. They would run a little bubble screen. And then this would be your RPO post-snap read. Okay. If he were to insert, then you could run the slant backside and replace him. Every time we want to replace that defender, because then you start getting into other stuff if you don't replace. So you want to replace him right there. if he were to insert. If he drops, you hand the ball off and you still have a numbers advantage. So here's one that we've ran for years and years and years off of a 3 out of a trip set. And here's a simple diagram for you. Here's our replace route. We actually like to still run a screen out here, and we kind of combine the gift, into this. And then the backside will run a slant. Now, we could tag either side as the gift and the RPO, but typically this will be the RPO read right here, this defender, okay? If he tries to insert into the box, we're going to pull it and we're going to replace him. Pre-snap, if he's way inside and this guy's playing off like this, we may just throw the bubble out here, okay? But this is the RPO read. Now, I've got a couple clips from 2018. I was at a different school than I'm at now where we're running this exact play. Let's see if I can get this to play. This is at Lake Norman Charter when I was there. So what we're doing, if you can look over here at the top, he's going to block. The slot here is going to bubble. He's running the replace. This is our conflict defender now. All right, this is who we deem to be the conflict that week. So he's either going to insert into the run game or we're going to replace him. Okay. He starts to come downhill. Quarterback is reading. He pulls, we replace. Ball goes right there to him. All right, this bubble pulled that defender out, and we knew they were going to do that. They had a corner out here. They're both out. And if there's somebody outside of the RPO'd receiver, it's the next man is the conflict. So we're going to read the next man inside of him as our conflict defender. So it's him right there. So you'll see again, okay, he comes downhill. Quarterback sees that he's inserting into the run. The number 3 receiver here will replace him. We throw the ball, and that's a 9-10 yard gain on first down. All right. Let's go to the next clip here. And I got this all as one. I'm used to huddle and being able to skip them ahead. Okay. Same play. All right. Same play here. Now, they lined up a little bit differently. They have a safety playing off instead of somebody walked up. Pre-snap, he sees that he's off. He feels that we can throw this out there. Treated it like a gift. And we picked up 6-7 yards on it. All based off of, let's see how I can hide that and run that back. This is all based off of pre-snap alignment. He's playing off, he's playing off, he's playing inside. We have a run called. And we can still give that, but quarterback sees it. Man, I got to figure out how to use this thing a little better next time. All right, so here, this is why I got this. This is the very next play on the same drive, the exact same play. And this is why I'm saying that it's still a run. Okay, the O-line is still blocking. We give it, and this kid makes a great play.
Awesome play. Nice run.
All right, but it's the exact same play back to back. We threw the bubble screen, and then we hand it off, and the kid breaks it for 70-something yards. All right, same play again, and this is a bad one, actually. The quarterback misreads this. So right now, Dale, what do you think? If we're running a replace route, we got a bubble screen out here, what would you like to do in this situation? You got a safety playing at 8 yards, you got a corner playing at 8 yards, and nobody down here.
Right. There's a lot of room right there.
Yeah.
We're going to throw base. I want to get the ball in there.
Throw the bubble out here right now. It's first
Right.
and 10.
Yeah.
You got 6 guys in the box against 5. Numbers aren't in our favor. We should throw the bubble screen right now.
Right.
Okay. But it's all packaged together. So I don't have to be a genius play caller and say, man, I know that they're going to come out in this coverage, so we're going to throw this bubble screen. No. Okay. I'll let the players and the quarterback specifically make me look good and make me look like I know what I'm doing. Okay, by formation alone. Now, he misses this. He sees it late for some reason. God. He sees it late. That's what I was doing wrong. All right. And he tries to go inside, and now he comes back out here to it. And it was just a bad throw. But he should have gone to it early. Okay. Same exact play again. Now, there's a corner. There's a safety here. There's one backer playing or safety playing inside of number 3. They 4. There's 8, 9, 10, 11. So they're playing 2 over 3. And he's playing inside of number 3. Quarterback knows right now the run game is white. I'm going to throw the bubble screen outside based purely off of pre-snap alignment. Throws it out there. Kid makes a miss. We pick up the first down on 2nd and 1. Okay. Same team, same game. Alignment has changed. Now this defender is playing in between 2 and 3. The quarterback recognizes this. The bubble screen is white because he's playing outside. Now we're going to run the replace route inside, and this backer is playing way in the box. So he's still going to read this for the run game and watch the O-line. And this is the biggest key difference between a play action pass and a run game a lot of times. These guys are blocking for run. They're trying to drive them down the field. And this is why there's been a lot of controversy about RPOs, because a lot of times uncovered linemen will end up blocking a linebacker 6 yards down the field before the ball's thrown.
Right.
Which is illegal, but they get away with it a lot of times. Now there's been some changes to that, but you'll see here, okay, throws it inside. He replaced. All right, replaced him right before the snap, or right as the snap. You'll see him come downhill. He replaces. Quarterback pulls it, throws it right to him. Okay, so now we're going to get to one more word on RPOs before we get into the play action pass stuff. There's a lot of ways to do it. Some teams are going to read what we call the second level, which are the linebackers, which would be these guys. Some teams try to take it a little bit to a next level and read the third level, which is the safeties playing deep. That takes some real talented players to be able to do that. Usually, if it's a deep read, that's more of a play action look, but it can still be an RPO at times, and it all depends on what your O-line is doing. You can tell the difference. But 90% of the time when you see an RPO, they're reading some defender on the second level. So your first level is your D-line, your second level is your linebackers or safeties that are rolled down, and then the third level is anyone playing high. Teams don't RPO corners because corners are guys who are primary pass defenders. They have very little run responsibilities. And again, you're trying to make that guy decide, are you a run defender or a pass defender? Because you can't do both. So that's the premise behind a run pass option. You're putting a guy in conflict. You're allowing him to dictate what you do, which some people say, well, why do you do that? Because now he's always wrong. If he inserts, we throw it behind him. If he drops, we run it, and now we have a numbers advantage. So it's a way for teams to control a defense from being over aggressive, one way or the other, run or pass. And it allows you to take advantage when teams try to overload one area. Now, this is a play action pass that I'm going to show.
Just while you're ending up on RPO, so that those that don't understand the amount of decision making that the quarterback has to make in these situations, and I'm glad there at the end you mentioned you're trying to control the defense. So there's a lot of when people talk about watching film, is you start learning the tendencies of those players, and the player or the quarterback has got to be able to factor all that in a short period of time. Is there anything you want to say about that? Because I don't think people understand the huge amount of decision making that's taking place by that quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, those clips that I showed you, that was a sophomore quarterback who had never started a varsity game before, and actually was the JV quarterback until about week 4, when the first 2 quarterbacks had gotten injured, one playing and then one on the weekend doing something dumb and got himself hurt. So That kid wasn't even supposed to be our varsity quarterback, and he picked it up pretty quickly. But it takes time and it takes repetition, just like the triple option takes time to understand those reads and when to give and when to pull. It's the same thing with the RPO. There's just a little bit more leeway there. There's a little, it takes, you don't have to make as quick a decision. It still needs to be a quick decision, but you don't have a defender right in your face like you would with the option. So there's a little bit more forgiveness to it. Yeah, like with a triple option. It's also why, and you'll see teams do this. And look, I'm a high school coach. Obviously I don't know everything, but there are some teams that you'll see who will leave a defensive lineman unblocked and try to run an RPO, and you're just asking for trouble because you need to block the down line first. If you can't secure those guys, your quarterback's going to be in for a long night if you're trying to run RPOs, because now he has somebody free to come hit him, and he's going to be a little antsy and quick on making that decision. What we do to teach it is we make sure the quarterback, one, understands who he's reading. A lot of times that's the biggest problem. They don't understand who the conflict defender is that we're trying to, who are we wanting to make wrong? So that's the first thing, is making sure they understand who that is. And then the second thing is making sure that they understand what they're looking for. So with us, we like to run it off of some type of what we call a gap scheme, which is similar to this right here, where we pull a lineman, because that really gets these backers' eyes. They really like to come downhill when they see somebody pull. And that's what allows us to let that quarterback know if he comes forward, unless that kid is a Division I kid going to Clemson or North Carolina or somewhere like that, he's not going to be able to flip his hips and drop back into coverage underneath your throw. The vast majority of guys that we're going to play are not going to be as talented enough to do that. So if he comes downhill at all, right now you're going to pull the ball and we're going to replace him and take away that space that he just vacated, and we're going to put the ball in there. And it does. It allows us to slow the defense down, to keep them from being super aggressive and collapsing on the run so quickly. Because as soon as they see that ball drop, if they're coming downhill, that's less time that you have for your O lineman to get their blocks. So anything that you can do to slow down those linebackers is going to be beneficial. So let's get into the difference with a play action pass. Okay. And for me, a play action pass is used to influence defenders. So now, as opposed to us reacting to what they do, we're trying to force a reaction from them to set something up. So there's no run option here. Okay, this is always a pass, but we want them to think it's a run. So we're trying to create action by them, influence them to come downhill for the run so that we can throw it behind them. And a lot of times this is where you see your deep shot plays come from. Okay. There's other times where you'll use play action and you'll get it out, into the flat areas, the short areas. But typically these are the big down the field shots that you'll see, Saturdays and Sundays, quarterbacks really sticking the ball in there, then getting 3 or 4 steps and taking those deep vertical throws. They all come off of play action. So you're trying to influence everybody to come down for the run, and then that allows your receivers to run by them vertically. So this right here was a play that we ran against Mount Airy in the first round of the playoffs this spring. This play right here, I kid you not, was responsible for about 235 yards passing and 3 touchdowns.
Oh, wow.
And one kid caught every one of them. I believe he had 6 catches for 235 yards and 3 TDs. So we're just in similar formation to what I drew up for you. But again, he's running a little hitch. He's running a hitch. The only reason that we do that is just to occupy the two corners. This slot right here is who we're throwing the ball to. And he knows from the snap, we're throwing to this guy. That's how we teach it. We give a run action, and then he gets big. He takes 2 steps, gets big, and we throw the ball vertically. So here's the first one. There's the play action throw. And now he's going over top. Okay. All right, this play right here, there's about 50 seconds left in the first half. Our receiver here runs this in and then breaks it back out all on his own. It's a great job reading coverage, and that's something that we can do in another week is understanding coverages and the different coverages that you're going to get. So instead of him running this down the middle like he was supposed to, he saw this defender start to go backwards, so he broke it off into all this space. And that's something I give our receivers a lot of times is the freedom to find grass, which, for us, we're on turf, but same concept. Find the open space. And you'll see here we give a good play action fake. We pull a lineman. We're blocking with 7. So we're getting max protection, which, we're blocking as many as we can right here. This was this kid's first ever game starting at wide receiver, by the way.
Ran a good route.
All right, same play again, same game. It's 3rd and 7. We're not a team who punts a lot. In fact, I'm kind of like Kevin Kelly in the sense that I would prefer to never punt from anywhere on the field. So 3rd and 7 is a rundown for us a lot of times, especially at this part of the field. Once we get here, I'm going for it no matter what. My D coordinator at times gets mad at me, but we're going to go for it. So this is a rundown for us, and teams know that now. They've got 7 defenders right here. He's obviously playing man coverage based on how he's turned. This guy was coming in the box. They were having 8 come against our run game. So we had man coverage in this situation, which is great to run against this too. There it is again. All right. The last one here. Now, let me set the stage for this one. They just tied the ball game up 27-27. I believe there's like 6 minutes left in the game. This is 2nd down on our own 11-yard line. And I'm very aggressive too when I'm play calling. It doesn't matter where I'm at on the field. We're going to take some vertical shots if we can. We modified this route on the sideline the series beforehand. So instead of him running the hitch, I wanted him to run across because we started getting a lot of man coverage. And he just kind of was getting in the way sometimes. So we ran him across. But you'll see this too. This is the same play that we ran all night long as a play action. Sell the run. Get those guys to bite. Boom. Mm-hmm. And he makes one guy miss because, and that's what happens too with, 6 minutes left. That's what happens in this situation to where when you run play action, all right, you're going to get a lot of guys into the box to try to take the run away. So it allows you for a situation where if you make one defender miss, you're going to have a lot of space to run behind them. I mean, did what I wanted it to do. You see right now, as soon as this ball snapped, I mean, there's 8 guys within 5 yards of the ball. Quarterback sets up, delivers a perfect ball. Receiver makes a great job catching the ball and going up the sideline. And that was what won us the first round game against Mount Airy. So the difference for me, and how do I stop this share?
You have a great quarterback. He made some good throws there. Very good throws.
Oh, we definitely had a great quarterback this spring. I mean, no doubt about it. That's that kid's first year ever starting at quarterback. Came to us from elsewhere, and he, had a good, strong arm, 6'2" kid. He can see, so that was also beneficial. And then the kid who caught all those was a basketball kid. He never played football before. That was literally his second game ever playing, the first time he ever started. And, he had a huge game for us. But so kind of, getting back to the RPO versus play action pass, a lot of times there's confusion. Okay, what is it? So how can you tell? All right. The biggest indicator is the offensive line. All right. You're going to see a lot of times they'll aggressively set up to pass and there'll be some type of fake, but it's different than when they're running RPO. They're not going to be driving guys down the field. I'm trying to think who it was 2 weeks ago got called for a lineman downfield on a RPO when they actually just drove the defensive lineman 6 yards down the field. He was just engaged and drove him, and they called him downfield for it. That's going to be the biggest indicator is going to be the offensive line. The second thing is going to be the type of route thrown. Like I said, very rarely Now you'll see the high level teams, Clemson, Oklahoma, that level, Alabama does it. But for most college and especially at the high school level, you're not going to see those third level safety read RPOs. You're going to see the second level with the linebacker. So if it's a quick replace dump off route, or it looks like it should have been a run, but the quarterback just turned and threw it out there, that's most likely some type of RPO or a packaged pre-snap alignment read. So RPOs can be divided up, but they still kind of all fit in this big package of pre-snap, post-snap, alignment read, or movement read. But that's kind of the biggest difference. And then your play actions allow for those deep vertical shots down the field because you're going to have more protection typically, and you're trying to influence the defenders to come downhill so that you can throw over top of them. So that's where you get those big home run shot plays like we were able to do there.
You mentioned it just popped in my head, so I wanted to share it when you were talking about the offensive line can tell you. Back in, what year was that? NC State played Notre Dame in the Gator Bowl. Antonio Barnett was the one of the linebackers. And I don't know if you know who he is, but
the name's familiar.
He was around 0203 or so.
Exactly, somewhere in that time frame. He made 4 tackles in that game in a row that sealed the game, and he was. If you want to see one of the best tacklers you'll ever see play college ball, there's a lot of YouTube stuff up on Antonio Barnett. His nickname was Thunder Dan, but what he said that made him, so he was a little slower. He was a 4.8, I think, a 4.7, 4.8 linebacker, not the kind of speed of a linebacker that they're typically looking for, but he was one of the best tacklers. And one of his keys was he said he looked at the offensive lineman's knuckles, and they would tell him what's going on. So he would and he could read whether they're going to come downhill or if they're going to get back up on their heels and block. I don't know if kids are taught that. I would.
Well, we actually played a team 2 years ago, and I'm not going to tell them who they are because I don't want to give their tell away. Their tackles would give it away if it was a run or a pass, and they actually did it by 2-point stance and 3-point stance. Every time it was a pass, even if they were running a screen, they were always in 2-point for pass, always in 3-point for run. Even on draws, when they're supposed to be selling pass, they were still in the 3-point stance.
Mm.
So they gave it away. Yeah, there's little things like that we'll look at and try to tell our guys, like there's some stuff that, since I'm here at the house and can't do anything, I've been doing nothing but watching every film I can get on our next 4 opponents. And there's always those little tells that you can kind of find that you teach the kids to look for. And definitely that's one of them. I mean, you'll see some teams and I have to get on our guys about it. Make sure your stance is the same every single play. Because a good defender or even, a good, can tell based upon your stance what you're going to do. So what he's talking about, if you see, if all his weight's on his hand and he's getting ready to fire off the ball and come run block you, you're going to get those white knuckles from it. But if his weight's back on his heels a little bit, his hand's just down there because he's trying to get back on a pass set real quick, you're not going to have that. So there's a lot of little tips like that crafty veteran guys learn, and we try to pass it on to our kids, whether they pick up on it or not, or they're too focused on making sure they know what they're supposed to do. But stuff like that is key if you're not consistent in your alignment and your stance. There's a lot of things where I'll go back and I'll watch our own film to make sure that we're not giving away some of those tells based upon stuff like that.
I have so many questions I could ask, but I don't want to save them for another night so that we got things to talk about. But if there's the offensive side and who you pick on. So for you to think about maybe for another segment is, especially with RPO, is learning some of the weaknesses of the players, the defenders, and what their tendencies tend to be. One of the things that gripes me the most, and it's why I don't sit in the stands anymore, I always go down on the field, and I have a bad back now. It's hard to be down on the field standing all night for me. But I can't stand to be in the stands because I can't stand those coaches up in the stands. Um, I think one of the last times I was in the stands, I had to ask the guy, "How much film have you watched on the other team this week? Uh, what do you know that team's going to do in this situation? Now, have you got any clue? You're just saying you should have ran the ball, or you should have passed the ball, or you should have thrown the ball to that guy. Um, there, that stuff just irritates me to death because they have no for me. I understand football, but it takes me about a quarter or so to even begin to understanding tendencies. But because some teams can be so complex in the packages that they put on, you can't learn the tendencies in a single game unless they're a really bad team. You can't. So offensively or defensively, there's too much you have to know. I just wanted to throw that out there because film watching, and I think players should be taking huge advantage of this because every player, a lineman, any of them can gain advantage by watching their opponent for that week and how he reacts to situations, and thus that'll make him, I think, a better blocker or a better defensive lineman if he knows what the offensive lineman's tendencies are. So I'm going to want to talk about that kind of stuff too.
Well,
it's funny you say that. Like, I don't go to even pro or college games anymore. I can't do it. Too many coaches in the stands,
too many coaches
and referees in the stands who are, obviously biased for your own team but don't. And I get so frustrated sometimes. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. A lot of people, I mean, I get it. This, especially at the high school level, they're not seeing everything that's going on the field. I mean, you can't see everything that's going on during a play. There's stuff I watch. I got to rewatch the play 3 or 4 times to see what's exactly going on the play. So, it's a part of it. My wife laughs because she'll say, "Hey, did you hear this or that?" I'm like, "Look, I have developed this ability to where anything behind me, I don't hear it." We had people in the stands last week playing drums, and the official came over and was like, "Hey, your band can't play during the play." And I'm like, "We don't even have a band. Like, what are you talking about?" He's like, "There's drums playing." And I'm like, I haven't heard it. No clue that they're up there banging on drums because I've just gotten to where I block it all out.
That's good. I think most coaches should or they have to, because there's a lot of bad stuff that gets yelled down from the stands.
The fans part are just the worst a lot of times, especially the fathers that criticize their own team's players, and that's what I can't stand. I've
What
never.
I can't stand is the father that criticizes the coach because
I'm about to pull out a Mike Gundy thing here in a second. I'm just not quite 40 yet. I don't care what you say about me. It doesn't bother me.
The players, what bothers me the most.
Don't say anything about my players, because then I'm going to have an issue, and me and you're going to have a conversation, and it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah,
I don't like the undermining that I see take place, though.
Well, I don't like that either.
But
your coach can't call play because it builds and I wish parents could understand this. For any parents watching, the concept of a team, you are part of that team, and you have to work as a unit. That's the only way a team is going to be successful, is the entire unit. The entire unit's highly critical in success. And you, in influencing your son to not have the respect of your head coach, of being able to make the calls and make the right calls, is going to cause that player to be less confident and be less, the term we always hear about a great coach is that his players would run through a brick wall for him. And that's what you want. That's what you want with a team. You want to hold parents and everybody that would run through a brick wall. And if a coach is coaching badly, you still should hold that until the end of the season. Don't discredit. Don't do things that's going to hurt the team. Um, the
Yeah,
attacking of players, I'm with you 100%.
I totally agree with you, Dale, on that. To me, it's like if you have a family issue, it should be dealt within instead of airing out your dirty laundry to everybody. I
Yeah.
totally agree with you. Now, Dale, beforehand, you're talking about telegraphing plays, and or Coach Trotter, you're talking about telegraphing plays. My very first love, sports love, was always baseball. Always been a baseball fan. Back in the '80s, Pittsburgh '70s and '80s, Pittsburgh Pirates had this guy named John Candelaria. He was like 6'8".
A's, Oakland A's, baby. Go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, but Candy actually lives in North Carolina. He lives over in Cornelius now. But he great pitcher, but for in '85 he had a bad habit of telegraphing his pitches when he was in the stretch. If he was going to throw a fastball, he'd do this number here and go all the way down, and the players knew he was going to throw a fastball. Now, if he did the same thing, but it only came up to about shoulder length, they knew he was going to throw the curve. And I always love these little nuances. A lot of times players have no idea they're tripping the other team off. I I guess it was a couple weeks ago. I won't mention the team, but I saw this offensive lineman that was basically he was tipping off everybody if they wanted to see it if they were going to do a pass or run. There was one time it was a play that you thought it was going to be a pass for sure. And I looked at the guy's feet. And I said, no, they're going to run. And sure enough, they did a probably a 14 or 15-yard run. I almost got a first down of it, but something fun about watching, these little nuances that very few people can pick up on.
Yeah, and don't as a fan or another parent, don't criticize that lineman. Leave that to the coaches to address. The kid is
Yeah,
still playing for a reason. So the coaches already know he's got those problems. And I'm sure they're trying to work them out. That's the other thing is how can you criticize something that you don't watch? When I'm asked about is somebody a good coach, it's like, man, I'd have to go to practice every week. I have to go to practice every day and watch what they do to even to begin to have an understanding of is this guy a good coach? You can't tell from Friday night, except for maybe he doesn't make good decisions for the situations. But why is that? And maybe there's reasons for that. Maybe he is making the right decisions because of his personnel, of what his personnel can do.
Oh, that's a big thing now. Everybody wants to run the big shiny offenses that they see on Saturdays and even Sundays to an extent, and don't realize that, okay, those are great, but there's a reason why Clemson's able to do what they do because they have Trevor Lawrence and first round receivers and all this stuff, or the reason Alabama can do what they can do. And a lot of times at the high school level, especially at the smaller high school level, you have guys who maybe shouldn't really be starting, but you don't have anybody else that can fill that role.
Right.
So you're having to make do with guys who now, and I'm gonna be honest with you, the coaching at the 3A and the 4A level was easier than coaching at the 1A and the 2A level because I had twice as many players to pull from, and I had a lot of times more talented guys. Now I'll say that. Now this spring was probably the most talented team I've ever had. But, you can get away with more things at that level because you don't have to make your schemes fit your guys as much than as you do at the small level. I mean, we've adjusted big time from what we did this spring to this fall because we had to replace 9 starters on both sides of the ball. And a lot of those are young guys. I mean, we're starting 2 freshmen on the O-line right now. And 2 sophomores, and those 4 kids had never started a game on the offensive line until this fall. So we had to majorly adjust what we did, and that's another thing too that I think gets overlooked a lot of times is, this team over here does this because they have the players to be able to do that. Whereas, and like you brought up the wing T, a lot of people talk bad about the wing T, but a lot of teams that run those offenses is because they don't have the 5-star athletes. They don't have the guys that they can run the shiny offenses with. They have to do the things that are tried and true that they can do with the personnel they have. And then you brought up pass protection. There was a big discussion I was in the other day about how, you'll have people yell at the offensive line they need to block somebody, but it's a 5-man pass protection and the defense brought 6. And, what do you want them to do? They can't block 2 people at the same time. The quarterback's got to make a decision. But your casual fan who doesn't understand the pass protections involved, and if you're not a part of that team, you don't know even I don't know what pass protection it was, just happened to watch the game on TV. So, there's a lot of times where you'll hear people holler out stuff that I have to laugh about it, because I'm like, you have no idea what's going into that. You just the quarterback got sacked. It's the offensive line's fault. Block somebody.
Right.
So
the man come free and sack the quarterback. Exactly.
Yeah. But the offensive line has got a 5-man pass protection. They just brought 6. Somebody's coming hot and free. Yep. Quarterback has to get rid of it. It's on him. But the casual person doesn't understand or see that. They just think the offensive line didn't block somebody.
Yeah, that goes back to what I was talking about right at the end of your RPO thing, was the quarterback has to make a lot of decisions, and they have to be made real quick. In our mind, we're talking milliseconds sometimes decisions, because 3 seconds or so, he's on his back. If he's had to make so many decisions in 3 seconds or 2 seconds, really, you want those decisions made, that I've seen some great quarterbacks or great kids. How to put that? I've seen some kids with great arms. I'm thinking about one that went to Florida State as a punter. He had a great arm. He could throw football 70 yards in the air almost. So just right, spot on. But that decision making from here to here and to here to feet, whether he should move, throw, who he should throw to, was a little bit slower. Wasn't fast enough, say for 4A football. So he couldn't make those decisions in an offense based off of a wing T. And there's a lot of decisions a quarterback has to make there. He could not make the decisions fast enough to be a starting quarterback. So based on your offense, and if most of your players, let's say, are a wing T, suited for a wing T, you have to put a quarterback that's suited. And he might not be the best arm thrower, but he's the best decision maker, and he's the best step and fake, and so you can do those slants, and he's the best guy for that. And so to run for your team, that's what you run, because you have to run. Hopefully, as a coach, you make the decision. I'm going to look at my personnel, and I'm going to run the best offense suited for my personnel. That's also going to have to be suited for what you understand, and hopefully, you understand more than one scheme, right? You can't coach wing T if you've never coached it.
Right. And I had a conversation with a coach earlier this year who said, I'd love to do that stuff y'all do, but I don't understand it. He's like, I can't coach it. I don't know it. I don't understand it. And there's 2 sides to that. Hey, granted this was a short off season, but before that we had a really long off season. I spend, as soon as our season is over, I'm diving into stuff. I'm trying to learn something new every year, just so that I have more tools in the toolbox that I can pull out if our personnel doesn't match what I want to do. I'm doing that right now with kind of how we're adjusting our offense as the season goes. But at the same time, too, if you're not comfortable with the scheme, offense or defense, and you don't know it, and you don't know it inside and out to where you can make adjustments based upon what the other side is doing to you, then you're just doing your guys a disservice as well. Because if you're not comfortable with it to that level, you're either A, going to revert back to what you do know, or B, you're just not going to be successful. So, and at the high school level too, a lot of times, and again, being at all the levels and every classification, there's differences there. But the quarterback position is so important to football in general and high school football, where if you have a really, really talented kid at quarterback in high school, you can get away with things. But if you don't have that, you're really going to have to make sure everybody else is exactly where they need to be. And then, you get to, and just like with all football as well, if your line is not strong physically, but also talent-wise, you're going to have a long season. It doesn't matter what you do behind it and outside of it. If your line is not sound, it's going to be a long night for you every week.
Quick question for you, Coach. If you had to pick one offense that you've never dealt with before, but you'd like to try just one time for maybe a couple games, what kind of offense would that be? Or have you done everything?
That I would want to run?
Yeah, that you've never done before.
Let me see. What have I not run?
Single wing?
Well, there were times that we ran single wing this spring. We also ran the Notre Dame box this spring. I just didn't realize it.
About straight T or
straight. I'll tell you what I want to know, and I can't because they're like a mafia down there. I want to know that Texas slot too. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know what it is, look it up. You're not going to find any information on it because those guys are tight-lipped, and you got to be in the inner circle and do some ritual and whatever else. But that Texas slot T is a nasty offense if you know it. On top of that, it's kind of funny. I like the old stuff at times because I think the game of football is cyclical, and I think we're kind of starting that downward swing of we're going to start getting more ground-based off, more running attacks. And you see Chip Kelly doing it right now with 3 tight end offenses. I'd love to kind of know the wishbone and go old school with that sometime. If you had to force it for it.
Did you do much with that?
Nobody knows how to defend it anymore because all the guys who did are retired or deceased, and nobody's seen it in 30 years.
There's a lot of responsibility on the defense side.
Have you done much with I formation in the past?
I started off as in the I. That's what we were. We were a pro I team, 21 personnel, under center, and the offense that I was in, and we were kind of Nebraska pro I veer option off of it. And then the offense morphed from there, and then it went to the gun, and then it went to the pistol, and now it's kind of had its Gus Malzahn influence into it, and it's got a little Baylor influence in it, and now we've kind of got away from that, and we're getting back to some option principles, kind of getting back to my roots. We're 21 personnel, but we're doing it from the gun and the pistol, and with a off the ball tight end. Not going to lie, I've stolen a couple things from Coastal. I think everybody else in the country has as well. But I started off in the I. That's what I played in high school. That's when I first started coaching was the I formation. And the team that we're playing this Friday is an under center I formation team. So I've been talking with my coordinator a lot. I'm like, all right, here's what you got to do, for this. But not a lot of teams are running the I anymore.
Is it hard to find players who want to play fullback?
You got to have a good true tailback and a good fullback.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Nobody wants to be a fullback anymore. Everybody thinks that's the reason I don't call our H-backs or fullbacks. I just don't tell them that. Okay, I tell them you're an H-back, and they think it's something fancy. You're a fullback. They just don't realize it. But you got to make it so they don't know. But nobody wants to play in that anymore. And that's the thing too that you battle. Nobody wants to play in that scheme because it's not what they see on Saturday. Everybody wants to be in the gun. Everybody wants to be 4 wide. Everybody wants to sling the ball 50 times a game.
So do you remember Scott Young's offenses at
Yep. Coached against you many years.
Yeah. He was very successful with that eye.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he was.
Of course, he had good tailbacks.
When he got KP at running back, it helps.
Exactly. So you got a kid like that on the team. I think you really should, as an offense, look at, I'm going to run an I formation as long as I got a good fullback. You got to have a good fullback to run a successful I.
You really do.
Dale, have I ever told you the time of the first time I ever met Scott Young?
No.
We actually trespassed on somebody's property together. First time we ever met was over at the Battle of the Bell. It was back when Kannapolis or A.L. Brown and Concord played the very first game of the season. And we met and we became pretty good friends automatically. We're about the same age. Actually graduated high school the same year. And he says, "You sit over there, that place called." He said he always thought it was the plumber's perch, as in someone that actually plumbs water for you or drains and all that. And found out it was plumber, as in Plummer. But anyway, we walked around and we were out in this guy's yard, and all of a sudden this guy says, "Who the blank are you?" And Scott's like, "Hey, buddy, I'm Scott Young, and this is Jim West." And the guy all of a sudden says, "Hey, you're that West Rowan head coach, aren't you?" And I think the guy might have had a weapon on him, but I remember just being just really nervous, and Scott just didn't care anything about it. We walked away, and he says, "Jim, I thought the guy was going to blow our heads, blow our heads off." And Scott was he's just cool as could be, though.
Yeah, he was a good guy.
Scott was a real good guy.
Yeah, I didn't. I only knew Scott casually until. So I'd go to games. I didn't go to many West Rowan games, but I'd talk to him for a few minutes, and then it might be a year or two before I'd say something to him again. And then when the situation happened at Independence, I did I'd say it was a fairly successful, what I call a confession session. And I did not like the way that was handled at Independence. And he reached out to me right after I did that video. And I think we became decent friends, I would say. But he wasn't around, too long after that incident.
He died in November of 2017. It was right after, I think it was like a week after the last game of the season.
Yeah, and I wish I'd have gotten to know him more. We had some very long conversations on the phone after that, and we talked about life and his concepts of life and what he taught through football, what he tried to teach through football, and his goals of being what most coaches should be. And that's, you want to win games and you want to build a great team, but what you really want to do is have a young man that will think about you 10 years later and say, he made a difference in my life and I'm better for it. So a lot of coaches use it as they'll want to come back to your weddings or have you go to their weddings or go to their, be involved in their births of children. You want to have a coach like that. I think he was that kind of coach. So, but he ran the eye. Mm-hmm. Man, he was very successful. And you got a kid like Parks back there. You
use him.
You're going to use him. That kid you had to have a fullback, and I don't even remember the fullback's name now. But you got to have a good fullback to run a good, successful eye, I think. And they were very successful. He was very successful with it. So you don't see that ran very often. My offense in high school, we ran what was called the Maryland T. So we're talking the middle 70s. So we we had a red and a gray offense, and we had a T formation offense and an I formation offense. And I played fullback in that offense. And sometimes, rarely, but sometimes we'd run the power I, with three back, fullback, halfback, tailback. Of course, everything under center back then. I kind of like that offense, but as I watch offenses, I wish I'd have played in a wing T because my favorite offense is a wing T. I think you can do so much out of it, or a modified wing T. So maybe you do spread out. You have more than a split end. You can put wide receivers out. You can do things and still keep that base concept. And that's what was real. That's what Newsom, and I like the guy a lot, Barry Shuford. It's Barry Shuford's offense that Newsom ran. And it was a modified wing T. He didn't have a name for it, but it was based off of wing T. The offense that Butler ran through the 2000s up until Newsom left. That's a great offense because you can kill people if you're running a wing T and throw the ball.
Yeah.
That's and it takes the talent. You got to have the right kind of players to.
When you can use a wing T and spread the ball around, spread the field. That's a fun one offense to watch. Brian Hells does a really good job, or in the past he's done a really good job with that offense.
Yeah, so Brian changed it a bit. He introduced more I and veer and less wing T. Kind of, I'm not sure what you would call the offenses that they run now, but it's not what they were running in the 2000s.
Right.
And I hadn't looked at him this year to see what he's running. Um, Another good friend of mine. Do you know Brandon Sneed by chance?
Brandon Sneed.
In
Yeah.
passing, yeah.
In passing,
Whatever it
Brandon's
is.
I might get Brandon involved in some of this. I'm not sure what he's doing now, but he's got a great offensive mind. He's a very, very good offensive line coach.
Is he Kannapolis coaching backers right now?
I don't know where he's at. He was at so he coached with Shuford, and if you know Barry Shuford's very
He is the outside
demanding.
linebacker coach at A.L. Brown.
Is he at A.L. Brown now? Okay. He was last year at Vance, and he got
Yep.
hurt. He hurt his leg, and he's been he was offensive coordinator. Shuford made an offensive coordinator at Olympic, and he was offensive coordinator at East. And then he went to Hickory Ridge with Griner as an offensive coordinator. I don't know. I was curious if you knew him because he knows offenses very well. He's a one sharp. When I introduced him to Shuford, he played when my son played at Olympic, and my son did not have a offensive line coach. He never had an offensive line coach, and Brandon helped teach him offensive line his freshman year. Now I learned the position. I got tapes from Tennessee, and I started learning the center position because they played him at center. And I had to learn the center position so I could help teach him to play center. Now I'm going to mention this. Smart kids, what I did with my son is I taught him physics. He's a physics guy right now. But I taught him the physics of blocking. If kids understand physics, they can understand why a smaller kid can potentially block a bigger kid.
Yeah.
Technique's important, highly important. So that's some other things I want you to think about. We've gone a long time, but I do want to talk about player position in the future and techniques that are players are taught. Just from little things to big things. I don't know how you felt about what we did. We did go a long time. I took a lot of your time tonight.
You're fine. I just need to hop off here in a second. I got to FaceTime my girls and tell them goodnight since I'm quarantining at a separate location from the rest of the family.
Okay.
Good
So-
man. Good man.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep them from catching it. So
Keep them safe.
I
Awesome.
think we had someone from South
comment.
Point comment on here.
Well, South Point is playing Crest or Shelby this week.
I believe it's Crest.
I think it's Crest. Yeah.
We should be in conference play at this point. So
I forgot South Point used to play. I think this guy just mentioned that they played the Red Bone offense.
They got the Red Bone offense, which is it's one of those 3-back offenses that some there's Wishbone. They have the Red Bone.
There's Flex Bone, you name it.
Flex Bone. Those offenses I think can be very successful because I believe defensive linemen and defensive ends and linebackers are taught different responsibilities now and recognizing what they can do. So that kind of offense I think could be very successful.
This guy mentioned the Clinton Dark Horses. They always, under Bobby Lewis, they always played a T formation. Bobby, he coached at Clinton, I think 2 or 3 times. He coached at East Blade and he coached several other places. That was a fun offense to watch when the Clinton was really
the T offense.
So
the base offense for Charlotte Catholic is T. That's their base offense. So that's what the kids learn at middle school level is they learn the T formation. It's not a wing T, and wing T are different.
Right.
There's people don't understand that. It's funny because single wing and wing T are just wow. There's just like a massive difference where wing T is about deception and single wing is about mass of bodies in a location. Putting a whole bunch of bodies here and trying to overwhelm a point of the defense. I don't know if I made that too basic that it's not right, but there's a huge difference. And I remember when James Martin came up from Clover, because Clover ran single wing and was doing wonderful in South Carolina. And he took that offense to South Mecklenburg. And everybody kept calling it wing T. Well, he runs the wing T. It's like, no, there's nothing like the wing T. So that's a single wing offense.
Yeah.
So,
Coach, I hope you
there's
have.
there's my girls FaceTiming me, so let me hop off here.
they're most important. Thanks for your time.
Yes, sir.
And maybe we'll
All
have
right.
you next
All right.
week. It's up to you.
All right, sounds good. I'll see y'all later.
Take
All
care.
right. Thank you. So, Jim, we got on a long time.
Yeah, that was fun.
I don't know if there's
That
anything
was-
else
that
you
was-
wanted to say.
I was going to say that was probably the best definition of the RPO I've ever heard by far. Just great.
Well, I think that kind of format of what he did would be great to do for other things. I think there's a lot of moms that might want to understand, or dads even that might want to understand why you're doing things and why you didn't do things. And the RPO is, you really do have to have a quick thinking quarterback to be able to run that offense successfully. If not, you're going to make a lot of bad plays. You're going to make bad decisions. Or you're going to make decisions too late. You may have made the right decision, but you're a half a second to a second behind when you should have made it. And thus now you've maybe thrown to the bubble and you get that pick.
Well, before we've cut it off tonight, this last week, Huff beat Julius Chambers.
Yeah.
And last year, Huff beat Julius Chambers in the regular season. I can't remember if the same thing happened in 2019 or not. But
3
Julius
years,
Chambers,
I think.
I
Yeah.
think it's 3 years in a row. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, Julius Chambers won, state championships the last 2 years. I want to tell you right now, though, this Julius Chambers team, they've got really good chemistry. I really wonder how they're going to react from that loss. I mean, that's just such a impressive team altogether.
Well, losses in regular season, as long as you don't have too many, can be teachers, right? So you can learn from it. And this is one of the reasons, because that game was still close.
Right.
And you get that statement, it's hard to beat a good team twice in the season. That's because you learn a lot from that first season or from that first matchup. You also maybe have a mental advantage because you've got revenge working for you, and the other team may have a little too much confidence that we beat them before, we'll beat them again. I think the only thing it does right now is gives Huff an advantage of home field. Would I pick Huff to win again? I think that's going to be a tough game again. I think it's going to be come down to maybe late in the fourth quarter decision. I think it'll be a close game again. We did have a discussion last night about what are the differences in the two teams, Huff and Chambers, and I don't believe that there's any. I don't believe the player differences are great. I think they both have the same amount of great athletes, great players. I think they both have good coaching staffs.
Oh yeah.
But sometimes it comes down to the chemistry of the two, the chemistry of the staff amongst itself, and then the staff to the players. Chambers has an issue of discipline, and thus lots of penalties.
Yeah.
They've got to. We saw that kind of plagued Mallard Creek. You almost had to account that you're going to have 100 yards or so of penalties against you, and that's just going to be a given. And I'm not there's certain penalties that I accept because they're the result of the player being the kind of player you want them to be.
Right.
But that's probably Friday night that appears to have been one of the big differences was penalties. So those two are going to face each other, I think, in the playoffs. Those are two of the better teams. And I
So
tell you what, Jim, South Mecklenburg, I think, from what I've seen, needs to be in that mix of a talk of a Huff and Chambers.
oh wow. So where are you going to be on Friday night?
I don't know. I hadn't decided yet. I got to look again and see who South Meck's playing, but I was thinking about that. As long as my ear, man, I'm hurting right now like nobody's business. This whole part of my head. Um, I don't know. I was going to go this past week to the Huff. I was either going to go to the Huff Chambers game or the Olympic Weddington game.
Gotcha.
And Weddington, I watched the Olympic Weddington game stream. They didn't stream the Huff Chambers game. So I hadn't decided. Where you going?
I'm going to go watch the Rollsville Wakefield game because Rollsville, they went to the state championship game, lost to Julius Chambers last or back in May, and Wakefield's they're 4-1. Rollsville 3-2. Rollsville's lost to a couple pretty good teams. One of them being Pinecrest. So it should be a fun game to watch, to say the least. And I'm trying to find out who South Meck is playing.
I don't. They've got coming up.
Here, I got their
Oh,
schedule right here. Let's see.
the only game I know right now, I'm definitely going to go watch, and it's October 22nd because Jacob made a point about it last week. South Myers Park game. Um, but I think South Meck plays. They got Olympic coming up in the next.
Yeah, South Meck has actually got it's got a bye week. They
They
don't
got a
play
bye week.
again until Ardrick Hill on the 8th.
Yeah. So that conference is going to come down to them, Ardrick Hill, and Olympic, I think, and Myers Park. That's a hard mix, but I think from what I've seen, Jim, um, I am highly impressed with South Mecklenburg. They have got to have the best line that I've seen. As a unit, they exemplify that concept of team uh, as well as any team that I've ever seen in high school. They really have that top down. Joe's done a great job of implementing that standard that he calls it, that tries to create men and not W's. The W's come if you got all the kids bought in, your W's are going to come. So I
Well, you
don't
got
know.
you got Ardrick Hill Myers Park this week.
Yeah, so I
That'd
might go to that game.
be a good game to watch. So, uh, it's going to be interesting, like in Mecklenburg football or Mecklenburg County football. Mallard Creek, what's your thoughts about them at this point?
So I did watch them play Providence. Um, I think Mallard Creek is a good football team. Uh, I don't know that they can compete with Huff and Chambers, but that's to be seen. Uh, the good thing about football teams, and I noted this in South Mecklenburg, is that they're still getting better. Most teams level out at about the third game of the season, somewhere in that third to fifth game of the season. That team is who they are, and they're going to be that same team in the seventh game of the season and the ninth game of the season. Uh, but what I've seen with South Mecklenburg is that they're continuing to progress. I can't say what's happening at Mallard Creek if they're continuing to progress. They're not the physically big team like they were in the Palmieri era.
Yeah,
You can definitely tell that players have moved from there to Chambers. That player movement that I don't like to see.
right.
Um, So I don't know. It's
It's
going to be interesting. They might could make a little more noise.
I'll say though, so far this year, I've seen a big improvement in quality of football from what I saw in 2019. I think having that late season, the 2020-21, has improved the quality of football because I've seen a
Mhm.
lot of kids, a lot of I don't know, kind of almost like veterans that come out there. They might be juniors and they know their plays back and forth. I've seen a lot better execution this year than I have in many years. I don't know about you, but that's how I feel
Yeah,
about it.
I think probably because you had some players that didn't play in the spring last year because of college. That allowed some kids to step up. It's somewhat proof to the fact that spring football could be very beneficial in North Carolina. Uh, to have some form of spring football, it shows that I think that work that went in the spring, which was a real season, but if it was just work practice, would pay dividends the following year in making your sophomores and juniors better players
Oh, I
because
agree.
that gives them more experience to learn because now they don't have to worry about the guy that's in. They're not held back because they were in that season because the guy in front of them. So the guy in front of them graduates. He's not going to be taking part in spring football. Now it gives that kid an opportunity to learn more. And there's so many aspects to what a good player has to learn, but I think the most key point is technique, and that gives them opportunity to learn their techniques better, and thus they'll be more confident when they play in the fall. So
We got a
I'm with
question here
you. Yeah,
asking if Myers Park and they could hang with Huff or Chambers at this point. I have not seen either. I've seen Chambers, but I haven't seen Huff or Myers Park play. So I'll leave that question to you. Answer to you.
that's hard because I watched some of that Myers Park Cardinal Gibbons game that was streamed. I watched that. Um, I think Gibbons. Do you think Gibbons is a top 10 team?
I think they are outside the top 10, but not by much. They're definitely a top 20, but I won't say more like a
Okay.
top 15 team. They're not quite as good as they were in the past.
So those are measures that, but it's hard to measure how they'll play Huff or Chambers because there's no true common opponent yet.
Right.
Myers Park played. They went to Georgia and played, and um, I just don't know. I think the issue will be the physicality of the game
Right.
is probably greater for Chambers and Huff. Um, Coach Trotter mentioned it, the offensive line. So your offensive and defensive lines define a lot of what you can and can't do. And Chambers and Huff have big, fast defensive lines, which can disrupt um, and cut down. Myers Park is more passing, and it
Right.
can really cause the passing game to, as long as you got people that can cover. And Chambers and Huff can go into zero coverages. Their players are that good. I'm not
Now,
saying that's what they'll do, but they have athletes that can cover the pass. Um, so right now, I would not put them at the same level as Huff and Chambers. No.
well, this is going to surprise you. The team I saw this last Friday, I would put them on the same level as Julius Chambers, and that's Havelock.
Havelock. It
Havelock's a
doesn't
3A
surprise
school.
me.
Um,
Havelock is always, well, I shouldn't say always, but they are kind of traditionally a very good
oh yeah, I mean, for the last
program.
20 years they've been just incredible. But this year they only
Exactly.
have 6 seniors on their whole roster. Only 6 seniors, and this team is as big as Julius Chambers. They're as fast as Julius Chambers.
Hmm.
They got just as good at coaching as Julius Chambers. This team is really good. The only thing they don't have is the experience. Last Friday, ugly first half. Southern Durham plays a very physical, very good defensive team. They're a very good defensive team. I saw them take Leesville Road 0-0 at halftime, only lose it the game 14-6. Halftime, it was Southern Durham 2, Havelock 0. And the difference between Havelock and Southern Durham, both of them have about the same number. Both of them were pretty young, both great coached. But big difference was the conditioning of Havelock players. They did not tire down at all. Southern Durham, first 4 minutes in the third quarter, gave up 3 touchdowns. Uh, it was just like boom, boom, boom. First play, Southern Durham takes the kickoff, fumbles the ball. Havelock scores on the next play. Next time, Southern Durham marches down about third to their 40-yard line, throw a pick six, and then they punt. Havelock scores a touchdown, and you could just see those guys. Havelock, they came on to play a mission on that. Alan Wooten's a very, very good coach. And that's another thing that people don't talk about is their coaching there. Jim Bob
Mm-hmm.
Bryant, great, great coach. Caleb King, another great coach. Then you have Alan Wooten, a great coach. Alan Wooten, who is at Green Central, he did things with Green Central that nobody else should have done. Just incredible, incredible coach. Havelock, I would keep my eyes out on in the 3A East, and there's no subdividing anymore. So the big 3As,
Right.
small 3As, that's gone. Havelock's a team to look out for.
Well, what you mentioned there of happening in the second half, and you mentioned even a pick six, and when you're playing a team like Havelock that can be physical, you get a lot taken out of you in that first half of play. And while you've had a short 15-minute rest, you're tired. You're tireder. You're not at the same peak level. And as and I haven't seen the pick six, but this impacts quarterbacks and their decision making as well. They're a little tireder. They may be thinking about other things within their body as they're trying to make their decisions of when to throw, who to throw to. So that physicality of a game is, I think that if you go back to the Myers Park versus a Huff or a Chambers, the physicality will be hard for them to overcome.
I agree.
I look at Vance last year and Myers Park. They played in the regional finals, and the physicality of the game was the big difference. I say that was the big difference, but Chambers has got lots of athletes too. So it's not just that they got big guys. And I think the highly important thing is that their linemen are athletic. So you don't tend to think about, or people don't want to think about a lineman being athletic, but linemen that are strong and fast and can keep their balance, and can get back up from a block more quickly. That's hard to go against. You got to have a very physical line that can just smash them, steamroll them out.
And you know what? 90% of I can look at the offensive line or look at for maybe about 2 or 3 plays on each side of the teams, seeing how their line plays. That pretty much dictates who's going to win the game. And people don't realize it. It's in the trenches. I mean,
Yeah.
if you can defend your quarterback, you got better chances for success. If from a defensive side in, if you can blow by your blockers, or if you can knock over your block, the running back or quarterback, you're in better shape. The trenches are just everything. This last Saturday, if you saw the Carolina Georgia Tech game, I knew pretty early that Carolina was in big trouble because
Mm-hmm.
their offensive line could handle Georgia Tech. And
Yeah.
on the flip side, Carolina's defensive line could handle Georgia Tech's quarterback until Georgia Tech changed quarterbacks. When they got an athletic quarterback in there, game.
Right. Yeah, that was from what I saw of the game. The Carolina offensive line is was the big thorn in their foot
Yeah.
that did not come out. So nobody came and pulled that thorn out of that line's, paw, the offensive line. So
Carolina's in trouble too. They're going to have trouble. I think they'll win 7 games, but I don't think they're going to win more than that.
yeah, it's. Somebody asked me the other day if I was saying this just because it's Carolina, but no, I don't have the same. I don't have the same hatred that I had when I was younger, let's say, as a state fan. But I think that one of the problems with Carolina, and this is tradition, this has become kind of traditional, is they win the recruiting wars and they get all the great players, but then they don't ever seem to quite mesh them together. Um, so I had a lot of question about this season. A lot of Carolina fans I know had a lot of high expectations. But
We lost
when
a lot of things, though. We lost a lot of players.
they lost a lot of players, no doubt, great players, but still the recruiting classes have been greater than Virginia Tech's, um, any of the schools here in North Carolina. They still have rated higher, so they should have the players that could fill in. Um, I'm not going to predict what they're going to do because teams can. Well, I don't know. College, this time of the season, teams are who they are. You're not going to fix the offensive line in a week or two.
Just got a message up here about Havelock losing to Newbern. That is true. They lost, I think it was 42-7.
Mm-hmm.
New Bern's a 4A school, Havelock's 3A school. Let you know also, Havelock had been kind of hampered with some COVID protocols.
Yeah,
They've
exactly.
and that's a big unknown or a big X as in algebra, big unknown about not being able to practice.
Well, so
That's
I see I didn't flip my page over to the chat things. Um, the one thing you can always count on is, so I see Shelby here. Um, these people support their schools
oh yeah.
tremendously. You know, I'm impressed with the 3A support out of Gaston and Cleveland County. Well, Cleveland County's got some of the best football, I think, anywhere.
I mean, tell
Uh,
me 4 programs, 4. I mean, you have exactly 4 high schools. You got Burns, you got Shelby, you got Kings Mountain, you got Crest.
mhm.
All 4 of those schools, they've been to regional finals in the last 10 years. Shelby's how many state championships they won in the last 10 years?
Yeah,
I can think of probably 5 of them at least. Uh, you got Kings Mountain that seems like year in and year out they have some of the greatest talents. And if it
yeah,
wasn't for Charlotte Catholic, losing in the regional rounds, regional finals, they might have a couple state championships. Crest has
yeah.
been down for a few years.
Kings Mountain has become semi. Uh, I like all the teams actually in Cleveland County, but I've kind of taken a liking to Kings Mountain, and uh, they got to close the deal. They got to close the deal on a regional final game.
I don't think it's going to be this year either. I think it's
Yeah,
there might take a year to come back, but yeah, this in Burns. I mean, one of the best things that happened to Burns when they went down to 2A. I think they're still 2A now, but just great. We're talking about earlier on about like if I had to retire, what counties I'd go to. Cleveland
hmm.
County's one of them. Heck, over Craven County, get to go see West
Oh
Craven,
yeah, West
Newbern,
Craig,
and Havelock.
Newburn. Mm-hmm.
Some great teams. Duplin County is probably my favorite. East Duplin, you got a solid 2A team. You got North Duplin, who's been to a state championship. East Duplin went to a state championship game last 5 years. Wallace Rose Hill's been won a state championship. I think last one was 2017. And James Keenan, they won a state championship, I think I can't remember, it was 14 or 15, one of those years. I mean, just a great county to go to. A lot better than where I am in Orange County. Orange County's got 5 high schools. Okay, let's look at the 5 real quick. Cedar Ridge, which the district I live in, they don't have a varsity football team, so we'll take that one off. East Chapel Hill, they live right down the road from me. They're a 4A school and they're playing independent schedule, playing 1A, 2A teams. Take that off. So you got 3 teams left. Uh, you got Chapel Hill, who 3 years ago didn't even have a varsity team. Now they're 5-0, but they haven't played any really what I call a team that's going to make a deep run in the playoffs. They've made the curve, so they're probably the best school in the county. You got Orange County that has fallen off the face of the cliff. I think they might have won 1 game so far this year, and then you have Carborough, who's moving up to 3A school. But Carborough up to I think 6 or 7 years ago, they had to forego a varsity football season. I'm gonna tell you right now, it is tough to live in Orange County if you like high school football.
Well, that's one thing I can say about Mecklenburg County is you
You
could
got
find a great game every Friday night.
yeah,
I don't think there's too many weeks that you would not find a great game. With the proximity to York County and being able to have some of those teams come across and play, they may fill up those weeks when you don't have major teams playing weak teams. That's not a great game. It's when 2 good teams are playing that you have great games, and that's one thing you could pick a Friday night in Mecklenburg County, and you'd enjoy football every Friday night.
right,
Not too many Friday nights you just couldn't find a game to go to that would not be a competitive game and potentially at a high level.
right,
So,
exactly right.
yeah.
We did get a question in about from Gary asking about our thoughts on the East Forsyth. They seem to have an explosive offense.
Mhm.
If I was in Forsyth County, the teams I'd probably look at this year is probably Mount Tabor and then West Forsyth.
Mhm.
Parkland's kind of fallen off the face of the earth again. Uh, East Forsyth, yeah, it's. I just, if you like good coaching, though, I think you have to go over to Clemens to see West Forsyth play.
Yeah,
West Forsyth or Mount Tabor, because coaching in that county means everything, and those two have some of the best coaching around.
right. Again, to traditional, especially Tabor,
Yeah,
uh, another one of those traditionally good squads or programs. East Forsyth has been there, um,
they've won a
and
couple state championships recently.
yeah, they're usually the more physical team out of Forsyth County. I think when it
Right.
comes to physicality, um, I don't know enough about them this year to say.
In the
Um,
past, they remind me kind of like the 4A version of Kings Mountain, where they get
yeah,
really close, really close. They finally got over that edge in 2018 and 2019 won some state championship games, but
mhm.
kind of that same mentality. They finally broke through. Um, I don't know. I mean, East Forsyth will definitely be in the mix, but I mean they're going to have to go through the they'll have to go through the West. I don't see East Forsyth handling Van or Julius Chambers or Huff or
Right.
maybe might be
That
on top.
breakthrough is partly mental, but that breakthrough is because you're playing really good teams, especially if you're up into the 3rd and 4th round of the playoffs. Um, the breakthrough really becomes a matter of how well you can coach against. I think it comes down to coaching
Yeah, I do too.
um, and overcoming those things. You hear about that breakthrough a lot. Myers Park was getting hounded on it, of being able to break through and say beat Butler, and that was just to get through the regular season. But when you start talking about 3rd and 4th round, it's hard for some programs to break through because the coaching can't take them through that breakthrough.
Yeah, I kind of subscribe to the John Madden philosophy. He says that back when he was coaching the Raiders, they said that they couldn't win the big game, and he says, "Well, just tell me when there's a little game. Let me know if I can win that one." He said all games are big, and uh, when you play in the Steelers year in and year out for the national for the AFC Championship, it's a big it's a tough road to hoe. But
So I'm gonna mention something. My son's senior year, uh, he graduated in 2005. So the 2004 season, Tommy Knotts has gone to Duke. Bill Guiler is the head coach,
yeah, Bill.
and Olympic did a number of 7-on-7s with Independence that summer. Um, Not big 7-on-7s, but sometimes a few times they practiced together. It's one of the reasons I got to know Joe Cox so well. But what I want to say about that is we're talking about a 7-on-7, and Giler was yelling his kids that about how every play is a Super Bowl play. So he took it not just at every game as like Madden is saying, tell me when a game is small. Giler was making it that every play. He was preaching that to his kids, instilling into that group of kids that you got to treat every play as if you're playing in the Super Bowl. No matter who you're against, but you got to execute each play. So every play is a big play. Every game is a big game. I understand what Madden's saying there, but when we get to we're 10-0, 11-0, 12-0, 13-0, and then we lose, we can't carry it through a regional final. It's because we're now facing a team that is a championship contender, and I see there that Des the Prez says he agrees it's coaching and momentum. So maybe you got the momentum, but now you face another team, a great team who has great coaching, and overcoming that is can be very, very difficult.
Oh, I agree. You got to put yourself in the place for success. I mean, it goes down to conditioning. If you get some really good conditioning kids that are good condition, you run them, work their butts off during the preseason. That makes a big difference. Getting
A
these
kid has
kids
got
to
to. I agree. Now a kid has got to get over that hump. What you've got to, and this comes from the coaches, I believe, is that those kids have got to not self defeat themselves. So meaning that they get into this big game and boom, the opponent gets a quick score,
my
and
yeah,
the mentality starts getting maybe setting in on those kids that we aren't at that level. Um, so after we're down 14-0, and even though it's 14-0 at halftime, that's nothing. You know, that team scored 14 and a half. You can score 14. There's nothing that says you can't score 21 because you've probably done it that season. But the
right.
kids have got in their mind, and maybe coaches, that, well, I can't offset what they're doing. And it may be true, but I think at that level, there are things that you can adjustments. We hear about what adjustments were made at halftime, and it's those kind of key things when you get to that level: in-game adjustments and halftime adjustments. But more so, in-game adjustments. I think is where those teams can't get over that platform.
All right, Des the Press just asked a very good question. This is to me, this kind of goes down to I think it might be a different answer depending on what classification of football you play. Well, do you
Mm-hmm.
think it's better to play two platoon or to play your best athletes on offense and defense?
The thing about two platoon is you don't get as fatigued. Your players are fresher, but you may not have the best combination of players.
Right. You might not have the best talent on the ground.
Yeah, so because you're taking some of the talent and it's in the other platoon, so that platoon doesn't get destroyed when it goes onto the field. So that's you can do that at bigger schools.
Right.
I think that's I think that's an unrealistic call at a 1A and a 2A. Some, not or let me say most. There are some exceptions. Shelby has lots of players, so that's an exception that they can potentially build a 2 platoon. That's just so hard to call because you got to know your players and
Yeah, you got to know the numbers of players you have. Not only just the numbers of players, but players that you can actually count on to perform on the football field. You might have that you have on your program. You might only have 30 players that you really trust to be on the football field because they just haven't earned their stripes
hmm
yet. And I'm talking
yeah.
about like if you have a real young player that's maybe a sophomore is playing varsity or something like that. You want to, so a lot of times I think it's the best thing to do is to have JVs. JV, I think we're going to see a lot of JV or a lot of programs just drop JV altogether. Interesting things happen over Western Highlands. Same thing at Smoky Mountains. If you play varsity, it's 10th through 12th. They don't have a JV program anymore. They have what's called basically a junior high school, which is 7th through ninth grade. Uh,
hmm
if you play in Murphy, the 7th, 8th, and ninth graders all play football together. Over at like Mountain Heritage, Mitchell, the Western Highlands Conference. I like that approach, to be honest with you. You can have ninth graders move to play varsity if you want to, but I think that is a great way to get to kind of mold talent. It
hmm
gives those seventh and eighth grade players a little bit more exposure. Give ninth grade players more playing time. I like that. Always like that a lot. But I do have. There's one team that's local that has usually every year they have about 50, 60 teams, 60 players on their squad. They have a pretty deep quality squad, and the coach will not play double platoon whatsoever. You might have 6 players play both ways, and
uh-huh.
as the season goes on, you can see those kids more susceptible to injury, more susceptible to fatigue, and you'll hear in the stadiums the fans will turn against those players, and it's not the players' fault.
Right. It's
And
not the
this is a
players.
team that makes deep runs in the playoffs, but never go to the state championship games. So
If I had the personnel, I think I would run 2 platoon in certain situations, certain games because of the fatigue factor. But you got to have. I want to have the each platoon to be relatively equal to each other, so that I'm not at a disadvantage with the other team. So I think that probably comes down to not 2 platooning for a lot of programs the entire team, the entire squad, but maybe the line or pieces of the line. Um, I hate, on one hand, I hate putting say in a passing situation, putting in obvious passing, switching your players in and out based on situation because if the tendencies are that you stick to that, then it gives the defense an advantage of what how they can defend against that. Um, and granted, if you know you got to pass, maybe you need that package of quarterback and receiver to make it happen. Uh, but if you set the defense up for knowing that's the high probability based on when you put these guys in, you do it. Um, I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of giving things away pre-snap,
no,
or giving away as little pre-snap as possible.
I've seen a lot of 1A and 2A football over the years, especially when you go out in the eastern part of the state, because you're just littered with 1A, 2A programs. Like Pamlico I guess it was back in 2018 when they went to the state championship against Murphy. They had less than 30 players on their team. They were a state
Hmm.
championship, playing for the state championship. Yeah, they did not double the platoon. They played the best players they had, and those players got tired. Murphy, they had some players that went both ways, but they didn't have as many players that go both ways, and they knew how to. They had the luxury of the substitutes, and when you have 40 kids that can play a game of football, that you can pick out, it's a lot easier than if you have only 25 or so. It's just it's a big difference. The numbers really add up.
I think if you would see more two platoon in the 2A, 3A ranks if they had. So comparing that to 4A, in 4A you rarely see it.
Yeah.
No matter the numbers, you just rarely see it. It's always best athletes, and you may see pieces change out, a piece here and there, but you don't change out the whole line or the whole squad and put another squad in. That's a very, very rare thing to see, at least all the 4A football I've watched. Now, if you've
Right.
got the numbers in, especially say down in the 2A ranks, I think I've seen more of that happen in those ranks than you do comparative numbers to 4A versus 2A. Um, I don't know the mentality of why to do that. I'm a believer in you got to extend. You got to be able to extend the players in the game, but you also have got to play an equal or hopefully put on what you think is a better talent than what's on the other side of the ball. Um, However, good coaching, and maybe the double platoon teams actually have better coaches.
Something
Um,
else I'd say though, if you're a JV coach, for example, never heard anybody really get all excited about winning a JV championship. I don't mind playing
oh,
double
so let
platoon.
me tell let me tell you, um, the first time I ever saw a Tommy Knott's JV game was again with Olympic because of course I had kids playing at Olympic and um, we played Olympic. We played Independence in 2006, I think it was 5 or 6 at Olympic, and Tommy Knox was as involved in that game. Most of the JV in 4A, there's like a JV head coach. It's not the head coach of the varsity. So they're kind of giving coaches an opportunity to learn to be coordinators and learn to be. That's what good programs do. And Tommy Knotts was apparently doing that. But this game ended up being a slobber knocker 40. I forget the final score, but they almost beat that team. Devontae Holloman's. That's it. It was Devontae Holloman's first. Uh, Either his first or second year at Indy, but he treats JV as a highly important part of his program. And if a player is, say, good enough to play on Friday nights, but he's not good enough to play, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that
So he's
makes a big
not good
point.
enough to play on my squad, but if he was on another team's squad, he might even be starting.
Right.
So a lot of places would still dress him on Friday night. Tommy Knott sent him down to JV, and the
See,
reason being they get experience.
see, to me, your JV is your farm team. It's just like in the
Yeah.
minor leagues is the farm team for the major leagues. I don't really care if they win or lose. If you look at Charlotte Catholics over the year back when the '80s, Charlotte Catholic never had a winning JV team. They always had losing JV teams. They'd lose to North
Hmm.
Stanley. I think they lost 3 times to North Stanley in my 4 years, and then tied the other one. And the next 4 years, the story. Catholic always beat the crap out of North Stanley in varsity football, except for one year we won in I think 1990. But the thing that I like about Knotts though he won games for execution. He won games when it comes to conditioning. If you went to one of his practices, from what I understand, there's not any wasted moments in those practices.
Right.
Everything was, you go to practice now, you see a bunch of people just kind of goofing off a lot of times, and
Well, that's what when we were talking earlier, and can you criticize a coach? And you really have to go to the practices to see how
Right.
organized are the practices, and you really need to go a couple of weeks so that you can see, does the coach do the same thing? Good programs, they do the same thing every Monday, every Tuesday, every Wednesday, every Thursday. They do the exact same routines, so they're all planned out. And each of the sessions with the different positions, they all do the same things on those days. Um, I think the very first thing when you look at uh, championship quality teams, you go back and you look at their practices, you'll see that. You'll see that everything's scripted. Uh, they know how to script it, and they don't let things get off script. Um, I have been to practices with teams, and I'm not name any of them, but uh, they're very unorganized.
Oh
And
yeah.
the coach is really, okay, we're going to do this for a little while. Maybe we've done this too long. Let's do this. You could see that in the coaches versus the kids knowing a minute from now we're going to be switched to some other thing. We already know this. Um, that's a big separator from Tommy Knott's teams to other teams that I've seen. I see the comment there that South Carolina teams seem to do a better job with the two platoon system concept. And I think that, again, has a lot to do with having the players, the number of players, because South Carolina it's not like North Carolina where we have such a large population and things are split up. And you've got that almost in some places. York County is an exception of having a number of schools, but you've got enough players, and I think you've got the coaches to be able to handle that. Because if you're going to do two platoon, I would assume that you're doing that in practice as well, and thus you almost have to have two offensive coordinators. You only have one, but you got to have another offensive coordinator that you trust to work with the other kids. Um, how many of those kids have to play on the other side of the ball? Because you can two platoon defense or offense, but do you do both?
South
I mean,
Carolina has a better football culture anyway. They usually get
exactly
more numbers,
different mentality.
different mentality. I mean, it's football's bigger king because they're. I mean, in most parts of South Carolina, the rural parts of South Carolina, kind of like where I grew up in North Carolina, in Stanley County. There's not much to do in Stanley County. There's not a lot of things to do in a lot of rural parts of South Carolina, and most of South Carolina is pretty rural. To be honest with you, except if you go around the Myrtle Beach to Charleston, that corridor, and around Columbia, and then like around I guess the upland area near Mecklenburg County. Those are your population centers, but a lot of those places, you go to Orangeburg or Bamberg or Florence, it's just not much to do there on Friday night
So
except go to a football game.
back in the '80s, early '80s, I worked for an electric motor repair facility, and one of my early jobs was I ran what were called routes and go to different textile plants, and uh, we would do motor repair for them. So Gaffney was a certain target that we would go down to. And if you had to go to Gaffney on a Friday, that town shut down at about lunchtime. Right about lunchtime, it's like they turn a switch and it's all about the game that Friday night. Everything in that town. And that was true in a number of the places that I went to. Uh, a
That's
little
why
bit, yeah, it was a little. I'm sorry, go ahead.
around where I live, everybody must think football's on Monday night because all of our restaurants are closed on Mondays.
So I haven't seen enough South Carolina football to know how prevalent it is. I
Yeah.
have seen a number of games, but not enough to know if it's a highly prevalent. Because unfortunately, maybe a lot of what I watch ends up being the better teams. The Tommy Knox. I'm trying to remember. I went down to Berkeley and Goose Creek played back when Goose Creek was, owning the state. This would have been 2000 and maybe somewhere around 2010, plus or minus a few years, 1 or 2 years. I went to a great Berkeley Goose Creek game at Berkeley, and I don't remember there being a lot of two platoon in that game. I remember the sidelines being. My son was assistant coach. He was stationed at Goose Creek, the Naval Training Center, and he was an assistant coach at Goose Creek. So I went down to the game because of that. And man, the organization of that squad. Up here in North Carolina, you see teams with 20 coaches, and it's kind of disorganized, but
Right.
they were like a college team. So I had a cousin who played linebacker in the Independence back in the mid-late 90s. He also said Coach Knotts was. So it's, just so you know, it's TTS.
There you go.
But he is like Fort Knox though, trying to get in. Tommy Knotts believes in game day lifting. So why his teams, or one of the reasons his teams were so great, was his lifting. He outlifted every team in Mecklenburg, actually every team in the state. Nobody had that concept of lifting like he had. And when people started targeting to be like Knotts in his independence years, that's what you had to model. You had to model that lifting program first, because they built players. We were playing Providence. Providence was also Coach Harden when Coach Harden was at Providence. And Providence they were like on the cusp of beating Independence a number of years. The officials, I was shooting, I did a lot more photography then, so I was down on the sidelines. Well, I got to know a lot of officials throughout the year, especially if you were a side judge, I talked with you a lot. And so Providence just annihilated Olympic. And at one point, the official turned to me and he said, "Do they lift at Olympic?" Because the difference was that great. And yes, they did, but Olympic did lift, but the Olympic did not lift properly. My kids were not taught to lift properly. In
Right.
fact, my youngest son, he got back injuries from lifting. So you can't just say I'm gonna start lifting. You got to have people that know how to lift and can teach.
Yeah,
lift.
gotta do the techniques.
So Independence, that was Tommy Knotts. I think Tommy Knotts is the biggest thing about Tommy Knotts is he can organize a team.
Oh yeah, big time. Well, Dale, I think we kicked the can for a couple of, I think, gosh, 2.5 hours now. Can you believe
2.5
that?
hours, wow. Yeah,
I guess
we
we probably need to call it quits for this evening.
Yeah, I'm surprised we still have people here.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, we could talk football all night, but I
Yeah,
need to do something about my ear.
I need to.
So, Jim, we need to get another player back on. I really enjoyed listening to what Jacob had to say.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. On Saturday, I'm going down to a place called Whispering Pines down in Moore
I know
County.
where Spring Pines is, yeah.
And hopefully I'll get to talk to my cousin, Danny. Danny Batchelor. He just turned 75. And I wanted to talk about his last day playing high school football. It was on
Yeah.
the same day as JFK's assassination.
Oh, wow.
And he was playing for the back then it wasn't a 1A state championship. It was the 1A East Regional championship. They didn't have state championships from 1A at that time. They were
Right.
playing Weldon, and I think I want to talk to him, see if he can come on, because I think you really enjoy talking to Danny. He played for Aberdeen back the Red Devils. they were obviously Aberdeen and Pinehurst and Southern Pines consolidated to become Pinecrest in '69. But
Yeah.
you'll enjoy talking to Danny.
I didn't remember when that happened, but when you mentioned Whispering Pines, I'm thinking, okay, Pinecrest,
Yeah,
Um, I forgot Aberdeen had a high school.
they won the state championship in '56. It's
Wow.
six man football. They won against Southern Pines. They beat them 15-6. And
Wow.
during the regular season, Southern Pines spanked Aberdeen, and Aberdeen came back and paid them back. And Aberdeen Southern Pines had two of the best football programs around. They both got into 11-man football around '58 or '59,
Uh-huh.
and some fierce competition between those two schools.
So for our two viewers or anybody that may watch this, well, hell, anybody that's going to pick this back up and watch 2 hours and get to this 2.5 hours. But Aberdeen is just north of Laurinburg. So
Right.
it's down in that Laurinburg, Laurel Hill. Actually, Laurel Hill's, I guess, a little too much to the west, but
It's not that far from
right.
Richmond County either. It's just
Right.
north of Rockingham.
Yeah,
My
so there's
dad,
kind of like a nice little triangle you could make
right,
up
right,
here.
exactly
Exactly.
right. My dad, he grew up in Aberdeen or Pine Bluff, and my mother grew up in Southern Pines, so know that area quite well. But well, Dale, thank you so much for
Yep.
everything. I'm gonna call it this evening because I need to catch up on some sleep. I was yawning earlier on. And I don't know exactly why.
My whole side of my head is
Well, you
hurting bad.
need to take care of that, man.
Yeah, I'm gonna go take some more ibuprofen and Excedrin, and
Okay,
hopefully some more drops, and maybe by tomorrow or sometime this will be out.
there you
But
go.
I did enjoy it. Get get
I'll
our Dumpling guy. Yeah, you uh,
get my cousin in there.
get your cousin on, but try to give our Dumpling guy a or Duplin. Uh,
Yeah, Duplin. It's like it's not Terrell County. Or Tyrell County. It's Terrell County, and it's not Perquimans County. It's Perquimans County. We got some really hard counties to pronounce around here. Well, Dale, thank you so much, my friend.
okay,
All right, take care now.
thank you.
See you now. Bye.